So welcome. Thank you for joining those who are here and for anyone who's logging on after a little wave from us. We're talking all things values today. My name is Julie MacDonald, so I'm the Director of Strategic Funding Consulting at Mantra Strategy. A little bit of a mouthful. I'm still getting my head around to say it quickly. And as I said, it's about 45 minutes, so we'll do our best to have everyone out by 1:15. And then later in the discussion, we'll be talking to Brian from iSchool, who you've just heard a little bit about, who has had some really great examples of success in this area, and a very values-driven, but also online organisation. At Mantra Strategy, we are big, oh, I better click my PowerPoint, big fans of values, and we really look particularly at how it aligns with culture and leadership and brand, and how they together can be really critical drivers of advantage. Our work spans a number of areas. We work across people and culture, impactful strategies, strategic funding, which is the bit I head up, and leadership. And we've just launched a new product called Mantra Thrive, which is very much a subscription-based consulting, a little bit different, something we've done for the first time, where we're working with clients really to be that strategic sounding board. So if anyone wants any more info on that, let me know. Shameless plug. But I will jump straight in. So today we're looking at a couple of things. It's really how we bring values from being more than a list of words hanging on a nice poster in the office to something really tangible and aligned to the organization. So we're going to spend just a little bit of time looking at why values often fail in execution, and then look at some practical ways to embed them. And we have some real case studies as well. So the question I was going to ask on Mentimeter, and it's so fiddly to pull down the presentation, go into Mentimeter. So I'll just ask it, and maybe you can pop it into the chat, is which company values do you see are most commonly ignored? So which are those values that you could almost predict are values and are totally ignored? If anyone's anything to put in the chat, but if you don't worry either. Sure, we know them all off the top of our heads: integrity, trust, the good old reliable list. Does anyone have anything to add in there? I haven't got my chat open. Would you say anything there, Brian?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think from my context with iSchool, I mean, they are lived. So I don't really, and I'm obviously biased as the CEO, but when I'm thinking of other big corporates, like you've got stuff like sustainability and the emphasis on the environment, and then obviously that their service, their production, stuff like that is at odds with those. So organizations like Nike, and where they have the sweatshops out in the West, and they've youth employment, although they've tried to address those kind of areas, they're the kind of ones I would think of.
Ignored. Would anyone have anything to add to that from your own organizations? Nah, well, we'll jump on. Sorry. I love this quote. I always put it into every presentation, but it's surprisingly by Elvis Presley, that values are like fingerprints. Nobody's are the same, but you leave them all over everything you do. And you can almost hear him say that. But a great quote just to frame today. So I guess the question, when we were putting this together, was why do so many companies struggle to uphold their values? And there's a number of reasons. I think often they're a bit too abstract or too generic. The words like integrity, respect, innovation, without really clearly defining what that means or what the practical application of that is. There's a leadership piece in it, the commitment of the leadership and the executive to really drive them. And back to that, do as I say, not as I do. Mentality from probably old management styles, really, but that erodes trust. It reduces these values down to slogans and nothing more. Generally looking at the organizations that fail miserably, there's a real disconnect from the daily operations. They're sometimes designed very much at that top level of an organization, but without any input from frontline employees. So that just makes them irrelevant or impractical to employees. pure communication is a big one, and reinforcing them, like rather than it being that poster on the wall that just lists them, that they become a really discussed and referenced part of the business. Oh, we've loads of people in the waiting room, but Jamie, can you keep an eye on the waiting room and let people in as they come? Sorry to cut off there. I turned the waiting room on for the first time and I'm already regretting it. Here we go. Is everyone in? Dami, will you keep an eye for that? Hi, everyone. Hi, Clodagh. Good to have you here. Sorry if you were sitting in the waiting room waiting. We're just going through some of the, I guess, the values and the reality gap as to why they don't always resonate and aren't successful in companies. So we're just saying that, disconnect from the daily operations where they're not practical in a day-to-day in a day-to-day basis, or they're not discussed or referenced and they never get mentioned again. It's just a poster on the wall. There's then this piece about accountability and the absence of accountability, really, where there's no consequences for not upholding values. Again, they're just words. So for employees, there's little incentive to change behaviors or change practices. In big business, I guess there's some conflicting priorities. So often there is decisions made to make short-term profits or performance over long-term values. And companies that have done it really well put values above profit, or at least for a period of time, which I think is very important. I don't think I've ever done this in my own recruitment over different roles I've been in, but there's often a hiring misalignment. So values are rarely mentioned, even the recruitment process. Then you hire people who you think are amazing, and there's a little bit of a disconnect between what they see as values and what you might. So that creates a bit of an internal conflict. As they say, if you can't measure it, it's not worth doing. And the values are very hard to measure and without those clear metrics or evaluation tools, they are very difficult to weigh up whether they're working, whether they're being upheld, or whether they're tracking. And the last one I put in because of some of the examples I came across, and it's probably again that old style, big, beastie corporate, but fear-based cultures that employee were in certain organizations where employees might fear punishment or backlash. They don't speak out when values are compromised or fostered in the environment. So they just become silent about it. So again, they're not a living, breathing part of the organization. If I got them all in, I have, yay. So I thought I'd look at two examples. We'd all be aware of Patagonia. There might be, oh, you're not logged in, so you can't let people in. Sorry. Is everyone in, Tommy? Okay, I'll just have to keep an eye. I'll multitask. I'm good at that. I think everyone's in. So Patagonia, who you would be well aware of, but also the Starlight Foundation in Australia, who I've done quite a bit of work with over the years, and they just nail this values thing so well. So I thought I'd talk about these two examples. Um, the first being Patagonia. Now they'd be pretty well known for being a values-driven type of organization, and particularly with the leadership. And what they really hang their hat on is sustainability and a commitment to sustainability. But they've always focused their mission and values around this, pre-profit. It's all about environmental responsibility, activism, speaking out, etc. So there's a real genuine, I guess, integration across their business and everything that they do. And that starts at the top with their founder, whose name I can never pronounce, and I'm not going to start now, but Yvon Chouinard, I think. But he's well known for really advocating for sustainability, that businesses more generally should be environmentally responsible. And he always used the company's platform to speak really openly about climate change, biodiversity, and capitalism and being responsible. So I think just having that leader that do as walking the walk and walking the talk just really, really helps with that. But then they bring it down into their business. So they have lots of groundbreaking initiatives that really bring to life this commitment. So the one I'd be aware of is the 1% for the planet from all of their sales. And that has ended up resulting in $140 million dollars donated to environmental initiatives. So again, walking the walk, I think they had another, I think, don't buy this jacket campaign, which was quite interesting. They were saying, don't buy our products. Let's be sustainable. Keep wearing your old jacket if you can. So, really, really, they weaving it through their marketing, through their leadership, etc. They have some really good examples of how they've done this very publicly. So, for example, they sued the US government to protect public lands from deregulation. They've been very overt and out there talking about the rejection of fast fashion. So they're all in everything they do, they're talking about sustainability, whether that's supply chain or recycling, and so on and so forth. And I guess the icing on the cake with all of this was a few years ago. I think it was 2022 when the CEO transferred ownership of Patagonia to a specially structured trust and nonprofit to make sure that those profits go on fighting climate change. And so the business is bigger than him. It's quite amazing. And inevitably, this has a positive impact on their business. Their sales have exceeded over 1 billion annually. They have a very activated employee culture. So, for example, their employees actually get paid leave for when they're doing environmental activism. I just popped it up here. The success factors, they're really consistent about it. It's very authentic, it's transparent, it's accountable, and they have those concrete actions that really align with those values. So certainly one to be admired in what they do. A example then, a little bit more in the nonprofit world that some of us operate in is the Starlight Foundation. I'm not sure if anyone is aware of them, but they help sick children in hospitals. So they have these Starlight rooms and Captain Starlight, and it's all very fun and positive and joyful. But a couple of years ago, they went through a process to do their values again, to redefine them. And they made quite an interesting decision to just have one value. And their one value is the word shine. And they actually weave that beautifully through everything they do. So internally, excuse me, from staff training to onboarding to the interview process, every staff member actually receives training on how to shine. And that's both whether they're helping children directly or they're working in the fundraising team. It's a really active part of how they operate their business. The CEO, Louise, who I know and had the great pleasure of being at Stanford University with just for 1 week, didn't go there full time. She brings it through every team meeting. It's the last thing it's the first thing they think about in decision making. It's how they recognize staff. So they actually do a whole recognition rewards process to team members who embody the word shine. Pardon me. And this is a monthly thing, so it's just living and it's breathing. Externally, they do the same thing. So every time they get a new corporate partner, they go through this shine process with their corporate partners to understand how this partner is going to help them shine. So it's very macro, but it's also very micro. And you'll see from their logo there, even in their communications and branding, it's positivity and joyfulness and whatnot. So an amazing example of how you can kind of carve this culture and really hang your hat on your values and shine, for want of a better word. What I think works particularly well for them is that simplicity. It's simple and there's real clarity around it, and it's very practically applied across the business. So just a lovely example from the non-profit sector. So you touched on this a little bit earlier on, some of the bad boys, and what they are doing, anti-shining. So for example, Volkswagen obviously had their commitment to sustainability, but then were caught sort of cheating the systems of the emissions tests. And that ended up in billions in fines, resignations, trust dropped, so on and so forth. Similar with Nike, they were all about social justice and human rights. And then at the same time, they were benefiting from forced labor in China. With Uber, they were about diversity and inclusion, but it was a very toxic workplace culture where discrimination and harassment was rife. Obviously, that ended up in another resignation. And then Facebook, good old Cambridge Analytica, who hung their hat on privacy, and then were obviously working with Cambridge Analytica, who were harvesting our data without consent, and that ended up in Congress. So it does show you how things can really go wrong. So now to flip on to a little bit of a chat with Brian. So just by way of background, Brian has been an advocate for young people for a very, very long time, and he has spent his career working alongside them. In his current role, he is the CEO of charity of iSchool, which is an online school for young people who've disengaged from mainstream education. I'll let you talk a bit more about that, Brian, when you get a chance to talk. But Brian's done some great work. He's represented at the World Conference of Online Learning, the United Nations High Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development Goal 4. And he's recently led, I hope I've got this right, a delegation from the OECD on school attendance. So a very, very vibrant and long career working in this space. So maybe Brian, to start, if you can give us an experience you've had where organizational values have positively or negatively impacted you and your work.
Great. Yeah, thanks for the kind intro, Julie. Yeah, to begin, so what I've done, obviously Mantra approached me last week and asked to do a session. So I've come up with kind of 10 hacks or ways in which iSchool embed our values and what's worked for us over the last number of years. But just to start to explain a little bit about iSchool very briefly. So we are a referral-based service for TUSLA. TUSLA educational welfare officers work throughout the country supporting school attendance. And when they're working with teenagers, 13 to 16-year-olds, who can't return to school for whatever reason, they may decide to refer them to our service. So we are a charity, but we provide accredited education. We're evidence-based. And when I took over back as CEO back in 2018, our annual income was less than $500,000 a year. We were relying on 50% funding from our founders. We had a team of 15 people in total. We knew there was a high demand for the service. We knew there was a lot of impact in the service for young people who got a place. But there was significant challenges there around being a charity and being outside of the kind of the Department of Education or being out of the national policy. So where we stand today, thankfully, is a different landscape. Our annual income is in and around 2 million. We have a team of 60 people. Our funding reliance on our founders is down below 10%. We've evidenced and we've proven the I suppose the product or the service over the years, working with the department's inspectorate and also independent evaluation. And we are now the largest provider of alternative education for under 16s in the state. So there's been a lot of success. So in terms of getting there and bringing the team and growing the team, I've kind of, as I say, I've developed sort of 10 leadership hacks. So the first one was advice given to me just as I started the role. And someone close to me said, as I was recruiting a key member of our team, that A's recruit A's and B's recruit C's. And it landed with me, and it's kind of, I've kept it since, in that if a person at the top of an organization wants to be the boss, wants to be the clever one, wants to have all the answers, they will surround themselves by B's, if you like, or people who don't know as much. But the real I suppose, expert leader or transformational leader will bring in other experts and be challenged and be open to being challenged. So the piece around A's recruit A's, B's recruit C's resonated with me. I mean, Confucius said, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So that's not only about the iSchool team itself, but it's also about the board as well. So it's surrounding myself as a leader with other experts in the field where I can share and go to them with problems and challenges and so on. And that's essentially emotionally smart leadership. The second, and a lot of these hacks, if you like, they cross over, but the second one is about sharing, and it's about openness. And I think, Julie, you touched on it there in your slides, that it's about, like iSchool has obviously come a long way in a number of years, and we've faced significant challenges, both in terms of policy, funding, need for the service, people management, so on and so forth. But it's about sharing. It's not about holding all the problems myself and trying to figure out solutions myself. It's about sharing them with the team and being quite open and transparent. And I found that brings people with you. And there's a great YouTube video with Brian Cody, who's the Kilkenny former Kilkenny hurling manager, and it's called, if you YouTube it, it's Brian Cody Value-Based Leadership, and he talks about nobody being the expert in the room. And that, again, it's that piece around surrounding yourself and being open in your style around getting advice. And ultimately, he does say that there comes a time where you need to make a decision, but it's about making an informed decision and being open in the style. And I think that style, that approach brings people with you when they're able to see what you're facing as a leader within the organization. The third one, if there's no questions, so it's about decision making at all levels. So, I mean, and again, Julie, your slides touched on it a little bit. So, iSchool is about young people. It's not about anything else. So, when we're making decisions on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, it's about asking the question, what's in the best interest of our students? And when you keep bringing it back to that, when you keep bringing it back to the purpose of why we do what we do, it connects people to it and they start to think about it. It's not about people, it's not about roles, it's about the young people, it's about the service, it's about the recipients of the service.
Keep going with your hacks. I'm learning so much. Great.
Good stuff. The fourth one I came up, it was kind of enjoyable actually taking a little step back from everything and thinking and reflecting on what are the key elements and how those values have been brought. But the fourth one I have is just around supporting people. And I was chatting to a colleague in Google this morning, actually, who's a board member of iSchool. And she was at an event last week where one of their senior leaders was talking about the single most important thing you'll do in an organization is supporting your people and giving them the stage. So it's giving them a voice, giving them the opportunity to take credit for their projects and their work. Like, I've always had a mantra in my head that everyone is a person, and it doesn't matter what role they have or what title they have or what their salary is within the organization. They're not working for me. They're working for the young people. They're working for the students, and they all play a key role. I remember a story being told to me back in DCU doing an education master's by the lecturer. And he was saying that I think it was one of the American presidents was getting a tour of NASA, and he came across somebody in overalls with a mop, and he said, "What do you do?" And he said, "I'm helping getting the rockets to the moon." So they had that shared purpose. So that story always stayed with me. And as well, on that, language is very important, and language is something we use on a day-to-day basis, obviously. So it's not about referring to my team or my unit or my section. They're not mine. We're all working towards our students and supporting our students. That's the subtleties of and it's really the small things make a big difference in a culture. It's everything you do. And language is a key part of that. There was another example was, I remember there was a former manager of the Irish, another sports analogy, but the former manager of the Irish soccer team, Steve Staunton, and he was going through a really bad period and they were losing loads of games. And RT were interviewing him after a game. I think it was the one where he kicked the bottle. And he said in the interview, "I'm the gaffer and I'll make decisions. So I'm the manager, I'm making the decisions." And I knew from that moment that he'd lost the job, because if you have to tell people what your role is and how important you are, then you're losing. So that was, yeah.
So that was one that Louise from Starlight, she said this fabulous line that I roll out a lot, but everything you do either underpins or undermines your brand. And that's why that shine is so important at all aspects. So Brian, you've obviously grown exponentially over a relatively short period of time. How do you keep those values alive and well when you're all remote, your work's remote, the students are remote, and you're growing quickly? What would you
say? I have a few more hacks. So we're actually our central team. So we have a remote team of mentors and tutors who are all remote. We meet them every summer in person for an event, a review and a planning day. And we meet them on calls like this, but that's obviously online. But our central team have a hybrid model, and we're based in Dublin 8, but we are a national service. The other hacks are things like attention to quality, attention to detail. So, I mean, I suppose at times in the past, you would see work as a leader in the organization. You might see work or things that you're not comfortable with. Maybe they're sloppy. Maybe there's not enough attention to detail. Maybe there's mistakes. And when it came to pulling people up on those, it's not about making it about what I want. It's about, again, bring it back to the students. Like, we're working with very vulnerable cohort of young people. Many of them have mental health issues, and it's about providing them with the best possible service. So again, it's about bringing them back to what the purpose of the organization is and what we're trying to achieve. Another one would be just, and Julie, interestingly enough, you touched on this in your slides as well, it's simplicity in communication. It's not using or trying not to use too many acronyms, trying not to use corporate jargon. Like I suppose a big part of obviously our service is online. It's an online school essentially. So you can't necessarily visit us. You can't reach out and touch us. We're a little bit kind of at a distance. So everything we do in terms of our comms, like our annual reports, our website, the research projects we've done, if we've a saying that if it looks good, it flies good. So we make sure that everything is presented really well, and that it's well thought through, and that the language we use is very simplistic and very professionally written as well. That's another one. The last couple are, quite simple, just, and again, probably comes back to recruitment and surrounding yourself with people, but it's about having a problem-solving mindset and being positive. Because as we all know, it's easy to get stuck in the problems, but it's about finding ways around them, solution-focused. Another one that I've learned over the years, and probably didn't come naturally enough to me initially, would be just the importance of reflection. So certain problems you're faced with on a day-to-day basis, you want to obviously have the solution available to you, but sometimes you need to go off and think about it. And another great analogy was in a university campus where they were building the university and they didn't know where to lay the path between all the different various facilities on the university. They decided that they would wait and that they would lay gravel and see where people walked. And then they used those pathways that automatically formed where certain routes people were walking, and then they laid their path. So I use that a lot myself when sometimes, and we're working with Mantra actually at the moment on an org structure, and we're thinking about certain functions within the organization and where they should sit. And a conversation I was having this morning with the same board member was about the potential of actually not aligning those functions with a particular role at this stage, sit and wait and reflect on it and think more and see how things go over the next number of months. So reflection is key. The final couple are just to share impact. So our service is really, we hear the most beautiful stories from young people and from families. Just yesterday, we heard a mother describe that the light was back in her child, is what she said. We did another one last month about a parent who was referring to the young person wanting to have a punching bag put in the garden, and that's great because they haven't been out of the house for so long, and that they're now passing them in the hallway, and they don't stay in their room when there's other family members around. So you hear these amazing stories, but it's great to hear them, and it's great for the team to hear them, but also it's about sharing them with the team, with the board, at AGMs, sharing them with groups like this, because it's a great story. And yeah, it's all about what we're trying to do. It's exactly what we're trying to do. And we don't, as an aside, we don't always just fill ourselves with the beautiful, wonderful stories. We also take on feedback that we get from students about how we can be better as well. So that sort of sandwich that we put in. And then the final one is a quote from, I think it's called she's called Maya Angelou. You might have heard it before, but it's about having a growth mindset. Do the best you can until you know better, and then when you know better, do better. And I like that one because, like, there was a period of time initially where we were putting in funding applications and things were not going our way, and we just persevered, you learned, and you did things better as time went on, and that ultimately kind of came to pass with the success we've had in the organization. So they're my hacks. I'd welcome any questions if there are any.
Definitely. Is anyone, Emma, Peter, Clodagh? I can't see the rest of the names. Do you have anything for Brian or ourselves?
Oh no, just congratulations. I mean, that's really inspiring stuff. And I really get what you say about, leadership is different to management. it's a different thing altogether. It's letting people bring out talent that they didn't really know they had and put it to work. And it sounds like you've got that formula going there, Brian.
Right. And what
Yeah,
about the
I think we
gallery?
do.
Sorry, Brian, you carry on.
No, I was just going. I think we do, and that was actually one as part of this org review that we've been working with Mantra on. That was one of the things that came through in the findings with the work and the meetings with the team, is that the values are lived. That's probably why I'm here today talking about them. But
so if you were to list your values, Brian, what do they look like? Like the actual list?
Well, I mean, I think that the main value in the organization is that it's about young people, and it's about that young people want to learn, and that they have great opportunity and great willingness to be creative and to contribute and to have a voice. And that essentially is, we're facilitating. Just because they're out of school and the mainstream system hasn't worked for them doesn't mean that they don't want to learn. So we're facilitating that. I mean, we also have named values in terms of inclusion, creativity, empowerment, compassion, respect, integrity as well. And that's obviously how we work with families as well. But essentially, it's keeping young people at the center.
Brilliant. No, that's amazing. So what to this group of people, what one small change would you say that could be implemented today to make them more actionable? Not to put you on the spot.
Are you putting that out to the group, is it?
Oh, sorry, I was putting that to you. Sorry, Brian.
Oh, sorry, I missed. Okay, apologies. So what advice would I give to the group?
Yeah, or one small change you could make today, say, to make them more real, breathing part of your
I
organization.
think use of language is really important in terms of the words we use, and it's the subtleties around language. And I know I gave the kind of the stark example of Steve Staunton and his "I'm the gaffer," but like if people are talking about what their roles are and trying to reinforce power and status by saying what their title is, you're losing. You prove leadership. Leadership is it's obviously, it's subtle, but it's through your actions, and it's through the way you talk. And if you want to bring people with you, you need to have the right tone and the right use of words. And that's hard because it's every day. I mean, you're dealing with people all the time. And iSchool, probably similar to the people representing the organization there, we're people-focused organization. It's education. So our costs, 90% plus are on people. It's all about people. It's all about relationships. And the success of iSchool and the success in funding, a lot of it has been about people, relationships, and trust as well. So that's all, key. So I don't know, does that answer your question? But
No, totally. Peter or Emma, do you have any, or Maeve, do you have any questions for
I love those stories. I love the stories of the end result, and one little victory at a time, one person at a time, one life at a time. I hadn't heard of iSchool though. So I wish I had. I want to look into it now.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we purposely keep quite a low profile. That there's a reason for that.
Are you afraid you'll be swamped by?
Well, we're not a choice.
Because
We're
loads
not
of
an
kids
option.
don't get on in mainstream school.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they don't want to participate.
Yeah, like there is a lot of young people who are in school and doing well. There's a lot of people in school who are struggling a little bit, and then there's young people who are in school and struggling a lot. But like the system is built to support those young people, and to retain them in school, which it should be. But if in a scenario whereby young people can't be in school, and one of our criteria is that they're out at least 6 months, to make sure that it's not a choice or an option for young people or families, that actually there is no returning to school, then we want to be the service. So that's kind of why we keep a low profile in a sense. There has been some Irish Times stories from parents and young people. If you Google it, you can read a little bit more about the impact of the service. What astonishes me all the time is just that the stories that we get back. Like literally yesterday, that was the light is back in my child. There was another one last week where a parent was watching their child do iSchool on the kitchen table, and they saw them smile, and they had to go into the hall to cry because it's the first time they'd seen their child engage positively in education in I don't know how many years. So, and it's astonishing how often we hear those types of
That gives you
stories.
goosebumps.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
So it's, in a sense, I've got the cheat code with the values, because how can you not be connected to an organization and a service like that? Because it's so powerful. So it makes my job a lot easier when that's the case.
I'd agree with you. Oh, sorry, Peter, you had turned your microphone. Do you want to?
No, I'm just particularly interested. I often come into an organization as an outsider, and I'm looking at branding and messaging, and values always comes up as a part of it. And in some organizations, you'll come in and will literally be the values on the wall, and you have to, I suppose, try and work with the teams. And I'm very, very conscious of including people. But with a much, we'll say, a much bigger organization, that can be tougher. And I'm always interested to see how that works practically with different companies. What size, Brian? I'm sorry if I missed it.
Yeah, we've 60 employees at the moment.
Okay, that's quite a lot.
Yeah, we've grown from 15 back in 2018 to now 60.
And did that involve smaller groups, or was it one big workshop?
Oh, we've scaled gradually over the last 7 or so years.
Yeah.
And we've added to certain roles, and I mean, it's obviously a service, so we've added a significant number of mentors to our team and a significant number of tutors who tutor the courses, and then our central team, which is kind of the strategy, the governance, the curriculum, a lot of the curriculum development as well has grown as well. And actually, we've got to the point where we needed to bring in Mantra to take a look at our org structure to make sure that it's fit for purpose for our new strategy. And as we probably will continue to grow, I'd expect.
I gotcha. And at what stage in that journey did the values come in?
Well, they come in straight away in terms of recruitment. I mean, you're looking at the recruitment process. You're looking at people who have an understanding of educational disadvantage, an understanding of what it takes to support young people who have gone through difficult times. So it's all the way from recruitment to onboarding to through constant communication and reinforcement and modeling as well. So and then, as I said earlier, like, it's in terms of the decision making. So, you know, what's the best outcome, or what's in the best interest of the young person or the young people when you're making decisions. And when you're saying that back to people, it's giving them a chance to reflect on the why and the rationale.
Very good. Thank you.
It reminds me, Brian, in probably my first big manager role, leadership role in Australia in St. Vincent de Paul Society. So a hugely complex organization that went across the country. And when I came into the fundraising role, having never actually worked in fundraising at the time, I realized nobody in the fundraising team had ever stepped foot inside a service. They'd never actually seen the work at hand. You know, it was all about the next appeal or campaign, but it was such a disconnect. So it took a lot of getting across the line now with the services, but we started a quarterly visit to a different service. So they were doing 4 a year. And in the office, we put up this big cork board, and at the top it said, "This is why we do our jobs." And when people had come back from the service, on a post-it note, they'd write a story they heard or something they told. And at team meetings, we'd go through them. So whether you were a reception or you were a caseworker, everyone was exposed to that work and the reason, the why, as you say. And it was a really practical way of kind of bringing to life those values.
And we did that. We partner with centres nationally, so a lot of school completion programs that are connected with deaf schools, youth diversion projects, youth services. So we have all team members who start with us will have to visit a centre to see iSchool, to see it in action, to get a better sense of what we do.
Incredible. Well, congratulations on all you've achieved. We'll all be doing a bit more work on iSchool. You're
keep
a
an
brand
eye.
that needs to be heard of. I thought, just to finish, the top tips, then Brian has obviously touched on a lot of these, but just if you were to take 7 little things away in terms of embedding values, One would be back to that simplicity and clarity, you know, really defining what they look like in action and not just in theory. The leaders talking the talk. I think Brian's a great example of that through everything that you do in the organization. The storytelling and that communication piece, keeping it really simple that you talked about, and then bringing that right through from onboarding through to reviews, etc. Harder to do, but building accountability into performance. It's often a thing that when somebody does something against the values, that's when it comes up. So they're not rewarded for living the values, but rather not living them when there's a problem, and been able to measure and track that. And finally, just bringing it through everything. So that decision making, you know, the policies, onboarding, hiring. So it is a very, very big part of the organization in the corporate world, as important as profit. We have popped in, this is fairly basic, but we've just popped in this kind of worksheet of things you can look at and questions you can answer. Dami will send all these slides through at the end, so you have a copy of them and a copy of the recording. And our next Impact Culture session, shameless plug again, is called Mapping Your Future, and it's about crafting a 1, 3 and 5 year strategy for impact. And that is on the 9th of April. So we'd love to see you there again. But thank you all so much for joining. And it was a small group today, but in a way, lovely way to do it. It's a bit more intimate. Emma, you were going to say something there?
Just thanks a million. That was really
thanks,
good.
Emma.
Thanks a lot. See you next time.
Great to meet you all. And thank you, Brian, again. Really appreciate your time.